Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Ryan, and I would like to thank you all for attending today's seminar on nutrition and pregnancy and having a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby. So first I'd like to introduce myself a bit. I graduated from the University of New England in 2016 with a bachelor's degree in medical biology and nutrition. I am still currently a student at UNE working on my Master's of Science degree in Applied Nutrition. I've previously worked as a nutrition coach at Transform Institute, where I work directly with a doctor to help people lose weight. I also worked at Medi Weight Loss, where I put together meal plans for people. I also primarily worked to help people lose weight here, anywhere from 5 pounds to over 100 pounds. I have volunteered for a program called Let's Go Maine. This program works to educate children on healthy lifestyles and nutrition to prevent obesity. I have also volunteered at Pearl Street Cupboard and Cafe, which is a food bank. It's not a typical food bank, but people can come in for a free meal. They'll sit in an area that's set up like a restaurant with full service. It was really cool. So both of these programs were really neat. So enough about me, though. Let's jump right into it. So, research shows that the first 1,000 days of life, starting at conception, are crucial in terms of preventing harmful health conditions later on in life. It has been seen that the mother's health, in particular, plays an important role of the development or prevention of harmful health conditions. So, things like obesity in mothers has been associated with high birth weight, obesity, and even increased risk for diabetes in their children. This is both when they are young and when they are adults. So, today we're going to be talking about chronic disease. We'll go over what chronic disease is, how chronic disease develops, and some signs of chronic disease. We'll also talk about how nutrition is related to chronic disease. We'll also talk about nutrition during pregnancy, what you should be eating, how to access these foods, some programs that will provide you with healthy foods. And generally, we'll just get into healthy pregnancy outcomes and what you can do to make sure you have a healthy baby and a healthy you postpartum. Chronic disease. Does anyone know what chronic diseases are? Typically, when thinking of disease, we think of things like HIV or other STDs, general illnesses. Chronic disease, however, are diseases that the ones that we're talking about at least are typically a result of lifestyle choices. So this means diseases like cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, obesity, they're all considered to be chronic diseases. So as mentioned, these diseases are a result of lifestyle choices. So they developed as a result of poor eating habits and lack of exercise. So these diseases can be seen in about half of the adults in America today. That's about 117 million people with preventable diseases that are a direct result of poor nutrition and being inactive. As I stated, chronic diseases are lifestyle related. So they tend to be a result of poor eating and lack of exercise, but what exactly does that mean? What is poor nutrition? Let's start with looking at this chart that I have up here. So this one particularly talks about heart disease, but it can really be applied to many of the other chronic diseases. So first, you ask, how many risk factors do you have? Now, you can see there's a list of major risk factors. These include age, gender, family history, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, inactivity, obesity, smoking, diabetes. The ones in red are non-modifiable. The ones in green are modifiable. So non-modifiable means that you cannot change them. You cannot change your age. You cannot change your gender. You cannot change your family history. The green modifiable ones are things that you can change. So you can alter your cholesterol. You can alter your activity level. You can change if you stop smoking, things like this. So then it talks about 7 keys to prevention: controlling cholesterol, managing blood pressure, reducing blood sugar, stopping smoking, moving, losing weight, and eating right. So we'll talk about ways that you can alter these things in order to prevent your health and your baby's health declining. Also, the last part says, am I making an effort or making excuses? And it talks about percentages. We won't really get into that too much, but let's start to talk more about some of the common chronic diseases. So, starting with obesity. Obesity is a result of taking in more energy than you're burning. So usually this means a lot of calories coming in from sugar, starches, fats, and not much movement. So foods that are usually high in calories are things like sugary drinks, sodas, some juices, iced tea, even things like Gatorade or vitamin water that tend to be considered healthy things. They have a lot of calories, but they don't give your body a lot of nutrients that it needs to run properly. Same thing goes for foods that are high in fat. These are usually things like fast foods and potato chips. They're high in calories, but don't provide your body with many nutrients. So when you pair this with low activity levels, weight gain will occur quickly. And this is important to keep in mind, especially as your bellies start to grow. It could be more difficult to be active. Cardiovascular disease, also known as heart disease, is a major cause of death, not just in the US, but all around the world. So commonly, due to poor diet, inactivity, the risk for developing heart disease increases by having a diet that's high in saturated and trans fats. So this would be foods like bacon, butter, donuts, fried foods. When eating foods like this, people also tend to eat fewer fruits and vegetables, a lot more salt, which can also contribute to developing heart disease. I'll also touch upon diabetes. So there are a few different types of diabetes. I'll be talking about type 2 and gestational diabetes. Essentially, diabetes is a result of your body being unable to return your blood sugar to a normal level after you eat. While you won't specifically, they won't specifically say that diabetes is related to certain kinds of foods, they meaning literature, researchers, they suggest that your risk is increased when you're overweight and you're not active. It's also suggested that you should stay away from fried foods, foods that are high in salt, sweets, drinks with added sugars, so foods that also contribute to obesity and heart disease. Now, gestational diabetes is a type of diabetes that occurs during pregnancy. So your blood sugar is essentially always too high which can affect both you and the baby. This is likely to occur from too much of a weight gain during pregnancy. It's important to have a healthy and balanced diet to make sure your weight gain is in line with the general recommendations. Before we get into nutrition for pregnancy, let's talk about some of the signs and symptoms of chronic disease so that you're better able to detect these if need be. Obesity, pretty straightforward. There are no major symptoms of obesity per se, but the signs are a high BMI and increased body fat. As for cardiovascular disease, signs and symptoms become a bit more serious. In some cases, there are no signs or symptoms at all, and this is more often seen in women than in men. Other symptoms that can be seen are things like chest pain, neck pain, indigestion, heartburn, heart palpitations, which is a fluttering, as well as shortness of breath. Keep in mind that some of these are also seen in pregnant women, but typically heart disease is something that is developed later on in life, not at a young age. Of more immediate concern is diabetes. Diabetes typically presents as increased thirst and urination, increased hunger, fatigue, blurred vision, numbness or tingling in your hands and feet. But these symptoms tend to develop over a long period of time. But in the case of gestational diabetes, the only symptom usually seen is increased thirst and urination. Most doctors will order a gestational diabetes test regardless of risk factors, so you shouldn't really have to worry about, if you have it, trying to identify symptoms, things like that, because your doctor will order the test regardless. So we've talked about the things to avoid, but what exactly should we eat? This is the ultimate question. Let's start simple so that we're all on the same page. There are two major types of nutrients, macronutrients and micronutrients. Macronutrients are where we get our energy from, so these are things like carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Micronutrients are not a source of energy, but they are necessary to make sure the body is functioning and developing properly. So think calcium, iron, vitamin D, those kinds of things. During pregnancy, your nutritional needs increase in order for the baby to grow. So for the baby to grow properly, we need to eat properly, as we're building the foundation for their lives so they can be healthy not only at birth, but as adults. Imagine I'm building a building. I need to use the proper materials and tools to build it strong so that it can stand long term. If a tornado or a hurricane comes along, I want the building to be strong so that it doesn't get damaged. Now, think back to the baby. The tornadoes and hurricanes of life are things like obesity and diabetes. So if we start building a strong foundation now, they'll be able to stay strong and healthy for their lives as well.